he has a metric he wants to gauge, but he thinks just because he did one rally in California, Donald Trump doesn't know a lot, but he does know that when he opens his mouth, bad things happen. It's why right-wing outlets like Fox and Newsmax and OAN are cutting off Donald Trump's speeches early, because they know the more their listeners hear him and see him unravel and really lose his mind, the more off-put they will be by Donald Trump. And that's why when he calls into Fox, they're trying to get him off the air as early as possible now, because they know how hurtful his own words are to his campaign. And it's why we see Donald Trump doing more of these non-traditional interviews, why he won't sit down with an actual journalist, because any pushback at all, a softball question, he'll really just instantly lose his mind and implode, because, as we've talked about so much on the show, he is unraveling. He is losing it more so than we've ever seen. And it's especially because he doesn't know how to define Kamala Harris, and it drives him absolutely crazy. That's why he's so caught up in grievance and in the past. And that's exactly what we saw from Donald Trump in this really strange interview with Dr. Phil. So strange that Dr. Phil, someone who I think is a supporter of Trump, he's been doing more interviews with him lately, was kind of stunned, was kind of put off. You could see how creeped out he was during the entire interview by just the nonsense coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. And I want to get into this first clip, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button.
Leave a like
it really goes a long way in supporting this show. And now let's get into this first clip.
I look at California. I gave a speech. I had a crowd so big. I said, "There's no way I could lose California," but automatically they mark it down if you're a Republican as a loss. That you lose by 5 million votes. I said, 5 million votes. I guarantee, if Jesus came down and was the vote counter, I would win California. Okay. In other words, if we had an honest vote counter, a really honest vote counter, I'd do great with the Hispanics. Great. I mean, at a level that no Republican's ever done.
You can see Dr. Phil is doesn't know what to say, doesn't know what to do. The interesting thing about Donald Trump is he is so off the wall that he's lying, comes 180 degrees over here, and he's actually giving a good image of what's going on in our matrix of a world. None of these people, Biden, Kamala, Donald Trump, really speak the truth from their heart. There is no love co-creation there. And in all of politics, there is no love's co-creation, because we've had 6,000 years of empires that aren't about love. It's about fear and wanting to stay in control. And that's not what's going to make this. So what's going to make this work out is us, all our relations, right? In the we in me, right? My life isn't about me. It's about the we in me. It's about the world around here. It's about all my relations. And who are all my relations? It's that tree there. It's insect. It's the mosquito licking on my finger, just about to bite me. And I go, no, don't do that. And it flies away, right? Instead of me squishing it. We can do anything with love. And everything else is fear and anxiety and ego. And that's what ego is. It's fear. And Donald Trump, the great blessing of Donald Trump is you can see all of that right there. His pompadour, his everything, and that he is a marionette. I'm sure they got wires in that poor guy, but you couldn't be that all over the place without, is he a psychopath? Maybe. Is he a sociopath? Maybe. Is he totally all about him? Yeah, kind of. But inside of him, as there is in all of us, there is some good, some love. Now, when you are so broken by your childhood, and then you are given an image of what success is, which is his father's racist, just go look what what Donnie's dad was. I mean, Donnie's dad was actually a billionaire, but he lived simply. He lived in a house out in Long Island, and he was all about power control. And he was part of the dark force. He's part of Hail Hydra. He surely was. And poor Donnie didn't know what to make any of it, because Donnie was really the throwaway child. It was the um, basically the condom that broke. That was Donnie, right? And he kind of knew it, so he had to double down on his dad's persona. And there are a lot of people. I see a tremendous amount of men, particularly, gaslighting their own lives. They're cardboard cutters. All of the poster boys of success and Elon, um, tiny micro penis Billy Boy, faceless book, um, and the rest of them. Right? There's about 8 other in there that make up 98% of the liquid, but it's not liquid. All of their wealth is debt. Wow. The person that we can see that's most closely pulling the string is the Rothschild. And whoever gets at the top of the Rothschild, he is like the character in, the first movie about Stargate, right? And you see where that little boy who's in Egypt gets, an alien worm gets inside of him, and then bingo, takes him over, right? And that's kind of what's happened on our planet. An alien worm has taken over, right? And that's nothing compared to what my mom used to do. Well, let's see who's here and what they're saying. Hey, James, I'm back. Yes. I hope you were on a nice vacation. Okay, then. You're Dorian Gray Owl, like the master. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You look much younger. Well, you know what it is. I don't really have any money, so I can't put a lot of. I don't have. I'm going to run out of gas in this car any moment, and I don't want to run out on the side of the road because I don't have the money to get towed and have this right. So I don't travel more than 2 miles from my domicile, or no, it's I guess it's 5 miles. And as of the end of every month and the first of every month are the toughest, because I only have $400 of discretionary cash, right? And so I live that way. And now I've done all of this on purpose, meaning when I died in 2014 and I came out and I was still me, I was still like almost 500 pounds. And I got the rich lawyer to, I said, I need a colonic, sir. I need this. I need this. I need to go to your house down in the Keys for 2 weeks and get my colon pumped out and have acupuncture. And I need an endocrinologist. And I did. So that rejiggered my homeostasis. And so I knew that I had to change my whole frigging life or I'd be dead, right? I couldn't keep going on doing the corporate world thing. I thought I was in control. I wasn't letting it, I could have been making millions, but I just made a little less than a six-figure salary, right? But I didn't need more than, you know, I'm living like a millionaire on $7,000 a year. Wow. When I went to, this to get my orthopedic shoes, the moron doctor who's my GP made me take all these tests, right? Which they wanted to charge $17,000 for, right? And then I went to them and said, "Yeah, good luck with that." And I showed them my Social Security thing and how much and that's 7,000. A single man, in poverty is $28,000 a year. And I said, right, good luck with getting anything. I own nothing. I have nothing. Good luck. Have fun. And so they knocked the $17,000 bill down to $400. That's what it cost them. And I gave the $10 bill. And I said, I'll be back when I got another $10 bill. And so they haven't really screamed at me at all. So anyway, that is the dynamic, you know. So when you don't eat a lot, you don't get fat. I lost, 260 pounds plus. So I'm, between 190 and 210, just about what I was when I was really good looking in my between 19 and 30 and 19 and 40. At 40, I started at my consultant business and started making serious money and not having to work. When I worked, when I was there as a social activist, when I was an artist, when I was a photojournalist, when I was a healer, when I was a master electrician, you know, I, I would basically, as a master electrician, I didn't have a truck. So I went around New York City with a canvas bag with 70 pounds of tools and would go fix anything, right? And I could. That was like my magic bag, whatever I needed. And there was 3 or 4 supply houses in New York City that, was started by my mentor, Grandpa Stoll. So I had, I could go in and I mean, I used to work at those places. They were all local 3 places. So I would work in those places and I would take, when I became a steward, there's apprentice, journeyman, master, steward, right? I was a steward. And I did it the fastest as anybody. I did it in 4 years. Usually it takes you 30 years to get there. But I just kept stumbling into, when I went to, the class for the apprentices at the hall, the guy never showed up. I mean, everyone said, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go." I said, "No, no, no. If you want this job, you got to stay here." I said, "Let's study this, right?" So we all had the book, we all had everything, and I already knew all that stuff. So I just kept going through it, putting it up on the blackboard, talking and showing how to do it. I actually had my little bag of tools, and I said, "These are the tools you're going to need." Anyway, um, that class was supposed to last 4 hours. So about 3 hours in, this guy shows up, walks in, sits in the back of the class, and just watches, right? And I said, I finished the class and I said, "Well, we've covered one whole chapter and it says here in the study guide it takes a week to do that." So I would say, anybody who doesn't want to come in Thursday, if we can do this every week and get better and better. So today is Monday. So tomorrow, Tuesday, let's see if we can knock off a chapter. And Wednesday, let's not. And so Thursday and Friday, we don't even have to show up, right? And so everyone said, "Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well." And then I went around and I looked at everyone's notebooks and I said, "So you got to start taking notes. And forget having a notebook. Take the textbook and write in the textbook. That way, the information is right there. Put a question, put an answer, put a whatever, but write in the textbook and then hold on to the textbook." Anyway, so everybody left and I was packing up and the guy goes, "Yo, come here. You're Al, right? You're Grandpa Stoll's boy." I said, "Yeah, yes. Who are you?" And he was one of the hierarchy of the union. He goes, "Would you want to continue to teach this class?" I said, "Well, you watched it. How did I do?" He says, "Best that I've ever seen. You motivated those people amazingly, and you got them to work together amazingly." And this was, there was one girl, right? And she was gay, and there was one kind of guy who was gay, and then everybody else had issues about all kinds of things, and I got them to work together. And he goes, "That was pretty amazing. I'm making you a journeyman right here, right now, because to teach that class, you had to be a journeyman." So I said, "Okay, sounds good to me." So instead of me getting the, you know, $200 a week, I got, you know, $900 a week teaching that class. But because no other journeyman wanted to do it. Years ago, you mentioned A Visit by a Man in Black. Could you? Yeah, so I've seen those guys a number of times, right? And they're not always in black, but they're dressed to be like really noticed. Like if you're observant, you go, "Whoa, look at that guy or girl." and yet they blend in, right? And if you're not keeping an eye on them, they can disappear. So a good example is that. So back in the days of the U.S. Psychotronic Society, and I was, Preston Nichols and Art Bielik and um, Bill William, the guy who wrote "Behold the Pale Horse," and Al Bielik's brother Duncan, and three other guys. And these guys were like, I mean, off the charts, brilliant, just another universe, right? They all have been played. They've all have been experimented on. They were like that character. Have you guys seen the X Men? Right? And the first one, you get to see the guy who's Magneto in the, he's got the tattoo. He's in the Jewish camp, and they're experimenting on them. They did. That's what they did do. Trying to hide out from my draft board by not breaking the law, but just not being around. I just would travel all over the place. I knew a bunch of hobos. I rode the rails. I was just not there. No place to receive mail. Right? They would send things to my parents. I didn't really have anything to do with them for a number of years, and because when they sent me up to college, I went to Hofstra University. And it was like I was already working in theaters. I was already doing what I was working for a guy named Lester Pollock. My textbook was written by a guy named Joe Melziner, the father of modern scenic lighting and design, right? Lester was his best boy. I was Lester's best boy. I'm going to college, and so I would like leave because I was working in shows and I had to be in the house by four, for a 8 o'clock curtain up. I had to be in the house by 4. There are a lot of things I had to check, make sure worked, everything right. I had to check in with lots of different people, and because I was Lester's best boy, right? The best boy is the guy who does everything, and that's why he's the best boy, right? Lester is exciting. What a psychic talent, even dress it right. So, um, all of this that we are going through now was juiced every 100 years or so. There's a period where things, all these different, there was the Thule Society, there was Madame Blavatsky in America and Russia, and she was all over the place. She was like many places at once. And all of this stuff started being between 1870 and 1913. The world could have been different. There were all these great minds and spirits. Nikola Tesla, um, who was a sleeping, you do readings. He had Edgar Casey. There were a ton of people who were about to make the world better, and the good old Habsburgs and Mister Khazarian mob himself, Mister Rothschild. They said no, no, no. Right, so we first, the United States was pushed into the Civil War on purpose because the president who was before that, I forget his name, but he's thought of as a real loser because he wasn't able to work like other presidents had been. Because there was always real friction between the 13 colonies and the rest of North America, right? And the Manifest Destiny of Thomas Jefferson. They were all Masons. Everything's a secret society. So anyway, back to my observing of Men in Black. So we had these guys were totally wired, right? And so uh, DARPA had these like little groups, working groups, right? Would get little projects to see what was what, right? It was straight out scene from everything in movies is a little tap on the shoulder of saying, "Yo, this is what's going on." It's basically straight out of Indiana Jones. When the feds and when the suits show up at the college and goes, "What's the Ark? What's the Ark of the Covenant? What is that?" And then Indy not only finds it, finds the Nazis, gets the Nazis not to use it as a secret weapon, and gets it for the CIA, right, and to bring it back home, right. So that's kind of what has been in the United States basically since Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was the guy who started the CIA, and the OSS, and it came from many different names, but he was the first guy because when his little experiment with the freaking key and the kite, that he was, discovering cold fusion. He was discovering, you know, that whole motif. Now, he didn't have the math behind it, he didn't have it, but he was a scholar of notoriety, and he had read. Newton was a little before him, but he read all of Newton. He read all the guys in the 14th, 13th, 12th, 9th, 10th century. He read all of the mystics from, the Masonic lodges, from every esoteric scene, and so he understood what was going on. Right? He understood what the Egyptians have technology. They had faster than light. They had 0 point energy. They could control gravity. How do you think they freaking built the pyramids, right? So Benjamin Franklin kind of started, at least in the United States, the Men in Black and the CIA and the NSA. He was a code breaker. When he went to Paris, what he did was he brought his printing press with him, and he printed these newspapers from Philadelphia, but he was doing it in Paris, and he was then he had people, his own little inner circle of Masonic dudes and dudettes, to circle these newspapers or pamphlets out to the French aristocracy. So the French weren't there; they were getting no information from what was going on in America, but they were reading this newspaper that was supposed to be coming from Philadelphia and giving the story, and he was giving them, this tilted story. So the French came in on our side. Plus, he stayed there long enough to read what the French were like, and he started a nightclub called the Hellfire Club, where the girls went into the girls' dressing room, the boys went into the boys' dressing room. Everyone came out totally naked. And then had like capes but had masks. So Louis the King Louis could come and fuck all the girls in public and not be nobody recognized. And that was the Hellfire Club. And I helped build a Hellfire Club in New York City. Anyway, so that's Ben Franklin. So all of this is coming from Ben Franklin, right? At least in America, right? And so there I was working with this crew, and they were all wired, meaning that Al Bielek and his brother Duncan were young men at the Philadelphia experiment. When they hit the switch and they went to another dimension, they jumped overboard, and somehow Bielek hit some metal part of the boat and bounced back into the boat and was semi-protected, but Duncan went into the field, and he didn't pop out until the time tunnel. You ever see that TV show? That's straight up, Preston Nichols' book, Montauk, right? So anyway, and it was mind control. It's a gigantic antenna. I mean, gigantic. They said, "Oh, it's part of the radar needed to protect us from Russian missiles." Well, the Russian missiles are going to come from Canada, not Ireland. You know? And so anyway, I knew these guys through the U.S. Psychotronic Society, right? And I was coming from a more esoteric occult scene because I was part of the Theosophical Society. I was part of the New York version of the Thule Society. I was part of the ISIS Foundation. I was part of all these things. And I was an up and comer, right? Because I had all these great teachers that I just kind of bumped into when I was a young man, like from 4 or birth, really, because Cardinal Cushing was my godfather and he baptized me. And he was straight up, Opus Dei slash, you know, the Teutonic Knights. So, and he was trying to be the good guy in the bad guy room, right? And so he picked, from infancy, he said, this kid, he's going to, I can make something of him. He wanted me to be a rocket scientist for the Pope. And so I got one heck of an education from birth, right? And so, because people were always keeping an eye on me, I could walk out, Trump said, I could shoot anyone in New York and I could, no, I could walk anywhere in New York and I'd be fine. I'd be safe, right? I was, protected by a bubble. And early on, I felt Jesus's unconditional forgiveness through God's unconditional love. Now, not Roman Catholic, not even Christian, not even pagan. This is a force that is in existence. It's what we're here to realize, right? Anyway, back to the boys. So there was this DARPA, and our handler. So I've always been attracted to gorgeous, brilliant women, right? And this girl comes to one of our U.S. psychotronic things, and she's dressed in deer skin, and she's got a 45 strapped to her hip, and not Annie Oakley, but who's the other gunslinging girl? Anyway, she just came, and she came to see those boys because those boys were already wired, right? And she just kind of flirted around, and then she kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, what did she say? You're special." And I said, "So what are you doing?" She goes, "I just came to check you guys out." I said, uh, "You hungry? Let's go get something to eat." So I had all these restaurants I wired. I could walk into any place, really schnazzy. And we were kind of near Lincoln Center, and right across from Lincoln Center on 8th Avenue is this amazingly the best French restaurant, at least at that time, in the United States, if not the world, right? And I went in there, and I, wired it in its third time about when Restaurants Associates bought them. Rejiggered the aesthetic of lighting wise, anyway. And there was this buddy of mine who had been my girlfriend, who was a great architect, real interior design architect, but she was an architect. I mean, she could build you a house or a skyscraper. Anyway, um, and we were best of buds. And then I met her at NYU, and then I bumped into her again a few years later, and we were both kind of, oh, I'm horny. Are you horny? Yeah, let's. And because we had already knew each other, we had already talked a lot. We were buds, right? And then she didn't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and neither did I. And so I said, "Hey, you hungry?" And I took her out to Luna's, and she loved that place. And my abandoned building was just down 3 blocks and over by the river. I was kind of in this abandoned building kind of right across the street from whatchamacallit, the South Street Seaport. Anyway, so there's not Annie Oakley. Who was the other one? Anyway, the other one. And I basically took her to this French restaurant, right? And she goes, "You know what?" I said, "What?" She goes, "I live just upstairs." I said, "What?" Because right across the street from Lincoln Center is this skyscraper, apartment that had gone co-op. did this thing about this was walk to the lobby. When the restaurant really high. Anyway, so we have a great little dinner. She goes upstairs. We go upstairs, and she's got this place totally macked out. Like something that Hugh Hefner would do. It's like the rain is coming. I better put up the windows. Do. Okay. So, we get up there, and she was the most amazing tease, right? She would just, she loved being naked. She had the body. So she was genetically engineered. She probably was a robot. And so at a certain point when I felt no pheromones, nothing, I mean, she was really sexy and she was like turning it on like you can't believe, but I didn't feel any connection. So I said, you know what? What, let's just, you got that nice big jacuzzi. I love jacuzzis. Let's just get in the jacuzzi and let the bubbles, and we can talk. Let's have some of that champagne. You got any caviar? So we were in there, and so she goes, so she then starts to grill me about the boys, and I say to her, well, I think you know them already. And she goes, how do you know that? I said, I just watched your interaction. She goes, aren't you special? So anyway, she goes, so I'm putting together a research group, and the boys are it. And would you like to join? I said, well, I'm not a joiner, but I will be a consultant. And she goes, aren't you special? Every time I would do something like that, she goes, aren't you special? And so I said, yes. And she goes, what do you want for that? I said, well, first of all, access. Second of all, $1,000 a week, as long as I do this. She kind of goes, I cannot problem. I said, in Benjamin's in an envelope, and you pick the day that we come and have a meeting up here. She goes, it's already, done. You guys have your meetings at the U.S. Psychotronic Society on Thursdays. I'm going to do this on Friday, and I'll come to that and we can go and have a beer after your psychotronic meeting and kind of prep the boys for whatever we're going to do Friday. That sounds like a plan. So that girl was a man in black, but she wasn't wearing black, right? Because she could if you just looked the wrong way, she was gone. I mean, she did that to me a number of times because there was, when I met John Lennon, right, the building next to that amazing French restaurant / apartment building condo was another building like that, and instead of it, it was a Rite Aid or some kind of pharmacy that had a counter, right, and it had probably the best newsstand in New York City. I mean, it had every newspaper, every European, had every Russian, and it was a spy drop kind of place, right? And it had all these journals. I mean, journals that you don't get to read. They're not on most people's. You have to be like a good journal. Jans. Or Aviation Space Week. You just can't buy it at a newsstand. You'll have to be like, okayed, and they send it to you. You either pick it up at your place of business or a place like that newspaper stand, or so outside they had a great newsstand that anybody could run. On the inside, where the pharmacy was, and where the whatchamacallit was. You got an ice cream or a cheeseburger or breakfast or whatever. Um, let's see. Sounds doggy. Yep. So I don't know how many times I'd be sitting there reading one of those journals, and she would like be right there. I mean, I didn't see her walk in. There was a mirror right in front of us, and I didn't, until I noticed her sitting next to me, and she always was like had her legs spread wide, and just had to look down. And she had no brassiere, just the most amazing breasts being held together or encompassed by a deer skin kind of vest, you know. And she had her gun. No one said anything about it, right? Because I don't think anyone could see her that she didn't want to be seen by. Because I don't know how many, like I said, just amazing amount of times she would just show up out of like, in nightclubs and all kinds of places. I remember one time in Danceteria, she, I will go there and check all the lights and sign the little thing saying it was inspected by me, the electrician, blah, blah, blah. And just like elevators have little things that say it's safe, right? So the inspectors couldn't just go and, squeeze because a club like, let's say, Studio 54 or Xenons or, you know, Tunnel Club, um, a whole bunch. My club, and I don't know how much, but let's just say Studio 54 made about 60 grand a night in cash. So you wouldn't want to be closed by the electrical or safety inspector, right? Oh, that light on the exit light, it's not working. It's blinking. I got to close you down for tonight, or give me $5,000 in cash, right? Which is, if you're going to make 60 grand that night, five ain't, But I came up with this little scam to keep the inspectors away because I was a master electrician. I'm putting my name and license on it and my insurance number on it, right? And so legally, I could take those guys to court. So they didn't. And, I knew all those inspectors, and there were the really honest ones, the old guys, and then there were mobsters, right? Who kind of, Tony Two Toes got them the job. They knew nothing about it except to extort people. So they would get a Christmas bonus, or 4 checks, 4 envelopes a year, right? And Tony would come in and get it and have a nice evening, right? So anyway, so what was her name? Not Annie Oakley, but the other one. So when we would have our Friday gatherings, we were brought things by men in suits, not more like corporate rather than esoteric. And they basically would drop us stuff off. Like the best little toy I can remember is, any of you remember? Oh, I forgot. One of the first personal computers looked like a suitcase. It looked like the kind of suitcase that pilots have that have all their stuff in. I think those leather bags they got from that. But all the insides of this computer were in there, and you opened up the leather part, and there was basically these 2 things. One would flip up, and it was the screen, and the other was the keyboard that would come out, right? And so that's what was delivered to us, right? And there was another suitcase that was like a Samsonite suitcase, right? When you open it up, there was all this foam in there, and there were 12 of these, like, they look like, stainless steel donuts, right? And on the side, they had, this is like, 1970 something. They had USB ports, right? I mean, they weren't, but they looked kind of the closest you could come. And there was no wires. They were just things you would plug into them. And it was like Bluetooth, right? But you'd think, oh, well, that's a Bluetooth. Then why isn't the gizmo just Bluetooth? I mean, no one knew what Bluetooth was, but why? I called it wireless. So anyway, the what these things were, and it was this little manual, and it said, "Do not operate without building a Faraday cage. That could stand 8 zillion Teslas, right? Because this thing makes an electromagnetic force as strong as like the freaking earth. I mean, it'll kill you by pulling the iron out of your blood. That's all it. It's like a little 3x4 card. It's do not make and it said 18 Teslas, which is pretty freaking amazing. Forget megavolts or kilowatts or Teslas were like, wow, right? So anyway, so we did, and we did it in that lady's um condo apartment, right? And being the electrician I basically got my boys to put a real ground because we were on the 12th floor. So I kind of went out in the hallway and we just drilled a hole from this floor to that floor to that floor to that floor in the stairwell of the fire escape thing, and took it all the way down to earth, took it to the water line, took it to everything I could ground it to, and that was the anode of the Faraday cage. So and this sucker was really bizarre. So we played with it, and it affected people mentally, psychologically. We made a table that we used crystals on, and we got people out of John Hopkins and Rockefeller Hospital and brought them there and cured them of cancer and other unknown diseases. Yo, fish. And so I worked with those guys for 3 years, right? And the last time I said, okay, basically everyone was just getting weirder and weirder. I mean, they were all weird to start with, but it was just getting weirder and weirder. And we seemingly were under a field of sorts. And I didn't work like these. All these guys worked for Sperry or Boeing or Grumman, because Long Island had, because Brookhaven National Laboratories, Nikola Tesla in the 1880s had turned all of Eastern Long Island into a science experiment. And there's all kinds of stuff underground down there. That's why the Montauk Project was there, right? And so half the guys I was working with that were part of the U.S. Psychotronic Society were guys who had been on the Eldridge, right? And Al Bielek and his brother Duncan. So Al Bielek was like, almost 60 when I got to know him, or maybe middle 50s, because he was like when the Eldridge was, probably in 41, and he was probably 19. Let's say 20, just for easy math, and let's just say 40, easy math. So this was in the 70s, so that's 40 to 50, 60, 70, so 30 years plus 20. So he's like 50 something, right? Duncan, who was his older brother, was 19, or he looked 19. God knows how old he was, and he was. These were the guys, for about 18 months I hung out with these guys. And the last thing, so we kept making very strange shit. And at a certain point, I said, guys, I'm tired of doing this shit in the girls' apartment. A, we're fooling around with shit. We have no idea what the fuck it is. And that like those little donuts, I mean, they were about this big and they could easily destroy New York City. So I said, guys, we have to have our own laboratory. And so, Preston lived out in Long Island because I think he either worked for Sperry or Brother, I'm not quite sure, or both, who knows? Because I did not mix metaphors. I didn't really poke into that little world, right? I didn't want to join, right? I'm just a consultant. So anyway, so we started doing our own things, and I was leaning towards the paranormal, right? Because that's U.S. Psychotronic Society, paranormal psycho. Right? So anyway, so we had some pretty interesting apparatus. We had I was manufacturing sensory deprivation tanks for the rich, because they were like, the new age thing was coming quick, and the rich were into it, and it was better than any drug you could think of, right? And so that's why I was so good at, because my sensory deprivation tanks weren't just, a bathtub with a roof over it. I got you cut off from everything. You couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything, couldn't smell anything, couldn't taste anything, you couldn't feel anything. You floated on top of the salty water, right? And it was in a basic, the tub was in a round, not round, but looked like a burrito, because I read this article in a Russian technical journal that was in that pharmacy about this Russian scientist who had, Stalin didn't kill him, but didn't trust him, so he put him in, solitary confinement. Just hold on a second. Whoa. So we were out there, and we were near Islip, I think it was, and it was his house at the end of a cul-de-sac near a farm, and 25A was maybe 2 miles from us, but you could see it because this was a house that was on the farm, and it was flatter. Long Island is flat as flat, and there was a road that came up to 25A and zipped around and hit this road, and it could go that way or this way, and after about 4 or 5 miles of doing that, you get to us at the end of the cul-de-sac. And it was a 1940s kind of house. It had a barn, and it was kind of nice, but no one had been in it. And we, looked it up on the tax roll, and because I was kind of fooling around with real estate out there, I kind of learned how to do that, and found out who owned it. And I called up the real estate agent, and I said, "Oh, you want to buy it?" I said, "Maybe, but I'd like to rent it first." And he goes, "Oh, that sounds, rent to own." I said, "Yeah, rent to own." "And what's your name?" I said, "Preston Nichols." And so I went to that guy's office with Preston and Preston's checkbook, and Preston gave him a check for, I think, $500, and that was first, last, and middle months, so at least 3 months rent, and so and with rent to own, and it was nice. It was springtime. It was beautiful, and we kind of, Preston started moving stuff in. I brought I built a table for myself to do whatever I was going to do. We went down to what was known as Radio Row, which was kind of where the World Trade Center was before. And there were these old Dutch warehouses that everything from like Nikola Tesla from 1890 till 1940, or let's say 1950, or let's just say 1960, it was all, military surplus stuff. I mean, radios, you name it, every kind of radar, and you name it. And you'd be in there and you'd bump into guys from Israel and guys from the Mid East and everybody who wanted to have their own secret weapon. They were like, had their own smart guy, and they're, going through all this stuff because there were some sweet pieces of equipment in there, right? That they would just, they make it to do some crazy experiment for the military, and either it panned out or didn't pan out, or it was just the first generation, and they just, you know, sell it to the junk guy, and the junk guy would take it to this guy, and he would sell it to us. Anyway, so we had a lot of stuff from those guys, and like Thyratron, really, everyone got away from tubes, but tubes are really the deal. Because yes, you can mediate a circuit through silicon, but when you're having a tube, you basically have a very exotic environment inside of that tube. You have gases in there, and you have heaters that heat it up. And then you have these other things that bombard it with all the X-rays and every you can think of, right? And there was a guy named guy who invented television, Farnsworthy, right? And he was the king of making tubes, every kind of tube you can imagine. And he got his shtick from a guy that Tesla worked with, because Tesla invented X-rays, right? And so he was, and Tesla would invent stuff, and they get bored and move on to the next, and other people would take it on, like Roentgen picked up X-rays, and everyone thinks Roentgen invented X-rays. No, what Roentgen did was perfect X-rays and figure out really how, Tesla visualized that this thing, X-rays, you could see inside the body, give you, X-ray vision, right? And so, and he used to, and Tesla was a trip. He would experiment on himself. He once bombarded himself with X-rays, and then he looked at all the bones in his hand. I mean, he ginned it up so high that, and why the Manhattan Project was called the Manhattan Project is that Nikola Tesla lived in Manhattan. And the atom bomb wasn't the only thing on the Manhattan Project. Like, the Eldridge experiment, was part of the Manhattan. Time displacement was a Manhattan Project thing. Because, like I said, that's why Brookhaven National Laboratory is out there in eastern Long Island, because Tesla had made, everything from, Sayville to Montauk into a sci-fi experiment. He turned the whole end of one end of the, I guess that's the southern end of the tip where Montauk is. He turned the whole thing for about 20 square miles into a phased array radar antenna, and was bouncing radar microwaves off of the planets so he could get a mathematical base on trying to figure out why this happened or that happened. And so, and Tesla died in the 40s, and so he was in on the atomic bomb. And like I said, that was just nothing compared to the other stuff that they were doing. I mean, the biggest nasty thing they were working on was time travel. So all of the guys I worked with were like, just a little part of Nikola Tesla's brain. Put them all together, you get that girl in the outfit as their handler. I'm sure she handled them. Me, because I wouldn't let myself be,
brought in, she wouldn't, she would just tantalize me. And I said, no, no, no. You know, any girl who's always got that gun on her hip, I can't really quite trust her, right? So she's definitely, so she would be above the boys that would be called men in black, because those guys are mostly robots, right? So, because they don't say much, right? They all wear the same Sears and Roebuck's black suit, except for the guys who are higher up on the food chain who aren't quite the robot. They still have to wear black, but they can be like Will Smith, right? Make it look good. And so because no one sees them, and it's not the little flashy thing, because they did that all the time. Half of the north and eastern seaboard wouldn't remember their name. So this is a long way around to get to this story of when I kind of bailed from that whole show. So we're out there in Long Island, and I am the electrician, psychotherapist, documenter, electrician, chef, and bottle washer, right? So these guys can't cook worth crap, right? So I'm cooking, right? There was a nice kitchen there, and so I'm basically at the sink, and it looks out across the farm, out 5 miles to 25A, right? And it's 25A is on the North Shore. The South Shore is another 6 miles maybe that way, or even less. So anyway, but you could almost see, if I got on top of the roof, I could see the ocean. That's how flat Long Island is. It's just a sandbar, right? And it's going underwater soon, along with everything along the New Jersey coast, go bye-bye. So anyway, and Manhattan too. Manhattan's going underwater. So I'm at the kitchen, and I'm like, peeling potatoes and cleaning vegetables and thinking about what I'm going to do for dinner. And I'm filling a pot up with water, and I see a car coming on 25. There's no other traffic. Black, looks like a Lincoln. Maybe it's a Cadillac. It's 60s or something. Who knows what it is? But anyway, it's going pretty fast, and I realized that the water's spilling over. So I put the pot in the sink and turn the water off and look up, and the car is just pulling into our driveway off the road from the cul-de-sac. And I'm like, and I turn to the guys and say, "Hey guys," and I turn around, and the two men in black are in the kitchen, right? 1 second, they're 5 miles away. I look down, put the pot in the sink, look up, they're pulling into the driveway. I turn around and say, "Hey boys." I turn around, and they're in the kitchen with us, and they're just standing there. They look like robots. Their skin almost looks like plastic, right? And you know who else they also look like? In Pulp Fiction, John Travolta and the black guy, the killer guys. They look like that, but not as human or animated as those two guys, right? They wouldn't be talking about, Burger King in Paris right now. So anyway, I go, and all of a sudden we hear in our heads, "You are not authorized to do what you're doing. Stop it." And I turned around, and the guys are on the floor crying. I look back, and the other guys, they're just taking the turn on 25A heading back into New York City. And I go out to where the barn was, which is our laboratory, right? That's where we had all our gizmos and stuff. And the truck we had, and it was gone. Not like on fire, not like bulldozed down, gone. And there was just sand and rocks and a kind of, you could tell something was there, but it's not, because none of that stuff was left. And that's when I kind of stepped back from those boys and that girl. I was still part of U.S. Psychotronic Society because I was helping organize a meeting at the United Nations that we did. I guess it was 70. Before Don and I went to Europe, so that was 77. We went to Europe 77. So yeah, so I kind of organized it. Don and I came back about 3 months later, in the spring of 78, I guess it was, right? And Clarence, who was a big wig at the United Nations, he, he was like my promoter because he was from Africa. He was a king from Africa. He was representing some African neck of the woods, but he had gone to real English accent. He went to Oxford and Cambridge and had like 3 doctorates. This guy was small art and good looking. All the girls loved him and dressed to the T. And he loved for me to take him to clubs and restaurants, so, and we would talk about stuff, and I would take him to the Theosophical Society, and they all kind of knew him, but and the fact that I would take, like, I took him up to Theosophical said Pumpkin Hollow. They had a commune upstate New York, and I brought him up there. And I kind of got involved with the Theosophical Society because I had a girlfriend who started out as one of my electrical helpers, and then she was brilliant, and she was like a street orchard, urchin. And I taught her that, and basically just would send her out on jobs, Grandpa so would give me a job, and I would go there with her, and we'd talk it over, and she would do it, right? And she would get 90% of whatever the gratuity was, because Grandpa, would bill them with the understanding that we got a gratuity, right? And so, because these people were Grandpa Stoll's clients, so he would just normally bill them, and we would get a gratuity. And if she did it, she would get 90%, I would get 10%, right? And that's how it worked. And so then we became sweet, and she just flourished, just became who she really was, instead of the little girl trying to hide so she wouldn't get raped or beat or killed or murdered on the street. She got confidence. She had a skill set, and I, brought her to the new school, and she just flourished there, right, as an artist. Anyway, she got involved at the new school with the Theosophical Society. Now, I knew those people already through the UN, but she was, she said, I want you to come with me. Theosophical Society, so yes, because there was a thing called the Green Door. I helped, or Blue Door. It was on Spring Street. It was like a clearinghouse for all things esoteric and occult, right? And the people from Weiser's books were the guys who kind of bankrolled it, because they were becoming a little too exposed, and so they had to take all the things that went bump in the night out of their storefront. So they bought a building on Spring Street. This is back in the day when buildings in Soho you could buy for $200,000, and so they bought a building, and so we'd have our meetings, and it was like a clearinghouse, because it wasn't just a Theosophical. That's where the the folks from the Thule Society were, and the ISIS Foundation, and all the other esoteric occult entities, and Madame Blavatsky, not Madame Blavatsky, Madame Kluver, Olga Kluver, and so anyway, so Mac, that was what I called her. She brought me up to Pumpkin Hollow, because the place was like from the year one, and it had electricity, but it was all tube and pipe, and everything was about to burn the place down. So we kind of rewired it with Romex. It was quick and easy, and so we did that, and it was a beautiful place. I mean, the gardens these people had were just mind freaking, because they were using scalar spiritual energy to make things grow. It's like those guys who in England that have that thing, right? So anyway, between that place and the Green Door or Blue Door or whatever door it is on Spring Street, and other entities that were there, we put together this really interesting. Do I have? I think I do. I'm going to put you over here for a second. I'm going to get some pictures of it. I won't get wet. Stop raining. Let's go. Is this it? Oh, I think it is. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here's Clarence up here, this black man. And this is in the basement of the United Nations. And there is Preston Nichols' butt. And this device he's working on was a scalar amplifier, audio amplifier. And what was really interesting, if you had a record, right? So I had a nice A&R turntable, and we hooked it up to this thing. And we had really cheap speakers, right? And if you just used a regular crackly, right? But when we had these old 78s, right? Of famous, opera stars in 1908, right? And we put it on, and you could feel the emotion of the guys singing. Not just, and the sound was the most beautiful, perfect. It was like you were sitting right there. And that's what that little device was that he was working on, right? And we had other devices, because I read this article that was in this guy, right? This guy right here. He had worked with
Farnsworthy in the latter 60s at IT&T, right? And then went to Lockheed, and they perfected 0 point energy, like in 63 or 4 or 5, maybe between, because they kind of had it in 1958, because they detonated hydrogen bombs without using an atomic bomb, right? And it was super duper small. You could have a hydrogen bomb, the size of oh, a tank that you would use to go underwater, about, 3 feet long, diameter about that big, to make a hydrogen bomb that big. And it was just a form of deuterium, not even deuterium. And the lenses that were made, they were like using styrofoam cups and stuff. But the pusher of the frequency was a tube, right? And it was creating a scalar wave. And that was what Tesla did. If you ever read Margaret Cheney's book, Man Out of Time, it's probably the best Tesla book there is. It's her book, Margaret Cheney, Man Out of Time. And she gets no one even talks about her. No one says anything about her. And virtually every Tesla book, they basically they just take it out of her book. There's a guy who, if you look Man Out of Time, let's see if Google has Margaret Cheney. Come on. So all of this stuff with presidential elections and the girl and Donnie and JoJo is a joke. It's just a distraction. Tesla book written by Margaret Cheney.
The books by Margaret Cheney include Tesla.
They give all these other guys books, but don't show her book. See, that's, like in 1984, where Winston, our protagonist, is rewriting history, and he's realizing, and so that's what's going on right around us, and has been going on right around us. That's what, Orwell was talking about with 1984. He wasn't talking about, because he wrote it in 48, and everyone's, this is what it's going to be like in 1984. And no, this is what it was like in 1948. Where's my hat? So, what time is it? Okay, let's see. So there was that thing. So the whole thing here. Let's just quickly go through. So here's my abandoned building apartment. Right, that was torched. You can kind of see but I put in a hung ceiling so you couldn't see all the burnt floor above, and I covered this one where the hallway, which was totally torched, with steel studs and sheetrocked around the windows, and this wall over here was all brick, so it looked nice, right? So we would have these, like, as you can see, this party was going on right here with all the intelligentsia, and see, that was my shtick. I mixed all of these people at these parties all the time, right? So here's these girls. These were like brainiacs from Cornell. This girl's brilliant psychologist, right? Computer programmer, another computer programmer. I had a thing for computer programmers. I don't know what the drawer was. Oh, here, this girl. She was hot and a brilliant computer programmer, right? And she was like not quite as brilliant as Christine Barton, but she was right up there. and she was she would like that movie about the black women who were the computers. They called them computers. Before they got the IBMs, these girls would figure out trajectories. She could do that, like in her head, and she could never get out of her head. Did out of her head. It was either totally insane or very scary or loads of fun. So here is the Ithaca Gathering, right near Cornell. And this was on the Iroquois Nation's property because there was no national forest in New York State because the Dutch rented New York State from what did I do? See, that's the problem. I can start losing things relatively easily in this one, the confusing lands. So I'm going to put you over there. I'm going to put you up here. I'm going to put you there. No, okay, I got everything. Now, I don't want to. What happened? Cancel. I'm going to cancel. Yes, cancel. Okay, I'm back. So 1 hour and 16 minutes and 40 seconds. So, well, that's a smorgasbord of stuff. You still watching Fish, or is that you, Jamie? Fish, I'll try and give you a call, but my phone just has, unless I am like downtown, the phone service around here is starting to just. It was much better before the rich people showed up. So anyway, you want to get a hold of me? The Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. Give a like, make some comment. And I want to know what you got from that story, because I just kind of shamanically painted a painting across the universe, right? I really indulge. How much juice do I have? I don't want to go out in the red zone. No, I'm still got 10 minutes. I want to hear from you guys in the comments or on the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail about if you could see any of the stuff that I explained, because it's there on the template. Right? I showed you some photos to give you a kind of a sense of what that flavor was like. That's why I took pictures. These are all shamanic images of a time and space, right? And I captured them right here, right? And they really do speak. So here's this guy. This guy was a Nobel frigging poetry laureate. And this is what crack can do to you. This girl, so this lady here, was the biggest political fixer in New York State and in the Democratic Party, right? I was her reader. I would go to parties with her. She had a suit. I never wore it except when I went out with her, so I couldn't get it mussed up. And this was, what's her name? She helped start Brooklyn Academy of Music. But Carrie Shea was the political. There's a movie with Denzel Washington and the girl who was Clarice in Silence of the Lambs. And she plays a political fixer. And if something happens in a bank and the bank robbers, it doesn't work out, everyone is held hostage, it lasts, blah, blah, blah. And this guy is going after the old guy who owns the bank thing because he's a Nazi, right? And this other guy lost all his family in the camps. And so he basically builds a wall in the vault, and where there was a vault, and he lives in it that's about 4 feet wide for about a few days until he gets what he wants, right? And then just walks out of the bank. But um, this lady, the character that the lady who played Clearest in Silence of the Lambs, whatever her name was, the character was based on her. So watch that movie. It's with Denzel Washington and that girl, and it's an interesting movie. And it movies are just like my photographs in that they capture an essence of what kind of is like. The X-Men movies. It was the first three, but the third one I think was this one that shouldn't have been great, but it was probably the best one. It was about took place, when all the our prime old X-Men who started everything were like in their 30s, right? And you get the backstory of those guys, right? And how they were buds, how Magneto and Doctor what's his name who ran the school, right? And I think it's called the First Class, right? X-Men First Class. That movie captures all of this in a movie. And it was really this guy who was the director, tried to get all different directors. Nobody wanted to do it because the first one was pretty good. Everybody was, oh, that's good. The next one was So nobody wanted to do the third one because they were scared it was going to be a dog. But they made so much money. The budget was like $70 million, like back 15 years ago, whenever that movie was made. And this guy was an up-and-coming director. And he said, because they offered him the second one and he was doing another movie and he couldn't do it. And it was such a short time. He was low budget guy. So he liked to take his time and make everything perfect. And so when he did this one, it was even less time, but they gave him $70 million. So he made that movie and he caught so much stuff, just like my photos. And that's what my photos are. And that's why I was pretty successful as a photographer. And so I would take pictures like Donna. Donna was a great photographer. She was a mix of Ansel Adams and Lisette Modell and what's that girl in the 60s who took pictures of odd people. And she was picked up a little of my shtick too. And we had a studio in New York for 8 years called DNA. And we became, meaning we had our own gallery. And so paying, photos to rich folks, right? And we sold them to what's his name, Brooke Alexander and Mary Boone. Sold our photos, and they didn't sell photos. They weren't, we were the first to do that. And we had a show in the Whitney Annual, and we had a show at the Museum of Modern Art, and it was DNA. And one reason why Don and I got divorced was that she just wanted to be Donna. And she said, listen, you do all of this other stuff. I don't want you to be a photographer. I said, what? She said, I don't want you. So Don, part of what I do is I document things. So I kind of need to be the photographer. Well, you do videos, I said, videos are for certain things. Photos are for something else. I had this great, dial, this half frame camera that I really, really loved. I bought it at Willoughby's. They had really crappy, they had bins of cameras, right? And you could find a gem in there. So anyway, I bought all my Leicas there for like $20, Lenses, another thing. So you were a real artist when you had a Leica body and a Canon lens, because Canon lenses, they were good. And they were the Japs copied Leica from the Germans, right? And so Canon made a knockoff Leica. Now the body wasn't as great as those Nazis can make, but the lenses were pretty good enough, right? And the screw mount fit perfect, right? So you could tell who was the artist, who was the person pushing the envelope. You'd have like me, I had a Hasselblad, I had a Nikon, and I had two Leicas, right? And I had a nice little photo metal box with the foam, and they all fit in there. And I had a really great strobe, a Nazi Magablatza 3000. It was like, 8 zillion candle power. So I could stop everything way down And no matter where I pointed the camera, everyone would half the photos of people would be like this, but everyone would be in focus. That's what when depth of field, right? So yeah, I had like I, I was like a dog with a bone. I had certain kind of things I would do, and I did them all the time, right? And my whole thing was that I would get to know people so they feel comfortable, and then I take pictures of them, and that's what a fashion photographer does, right? And well, Ansel Adams, he doesn't do that because he shoots, mountains, right? But the other guy, what's his name? Who's in the same crew as that? Because it's interesting. Whenever you do something, you're usually in a generation of people who do stuff, right? So, I was a painter, sculptor, performance artist, scientist, healer, political activist. She you don't need to be a photographer. I said, well, okay, I will stop, having calling myself a photographer. But what I am going to do, I'm still going to, you know, document this stuff. And so she goes, well, you can use a Diana camera and a throwaway camera. That's it. Because pretty much you have to send that shit out, right? And they send you back. You get a negative and you can print it, right? So, but it's color. So that means you have to do Cibachrome, which would kill you, right? So anyway, so I had friends in LA who took 35 millimeter film and 2.25 film, because those are in movie films, they got that size. And they would, as they were developing movies, they would throw in people's film. So they made, for $5, you could get your roll developed with a negative and 2 copies of each print and another roll of film in a mailer. So they'd mail that stuff back to you and you'd open it up and the stuff would be in there and the roll of film would be there, and they had another mailer. So you take the pictures on that roll of film and you would throw it in the mailer, send it off to them, and $6, couldn't beat it, because the envelope had the mailing thing to go back to them. So that was for 10 years. That was before digital cameras. That was, Donna, she became Donna, and she was right. That's all she did. So I didn't want, because people only knew us as DNA, Donna and Al, right? And so when she went on, where's Al? And they were, when she did her first show at Brooke Alexander, Brooke called me up. She goes, listen, I'm going to do a show of Don's work, and is that okay? I said, what do you mean? Is it okay? Of course. I said, well, I don't want you to be upset or mad or anything. I said, no, forget about it. No. If you're going to be, I haven't given you any pictures to sell, so, go for it. Yes. So I went to that show. That was the last time I saw Don. And that was about 2 years after we got divorced. And she had eased into her, she became a new person, right? If you go look at Donna Ann McAdams, photographer, you basically see her whole life from about 1980 on. It really doesn't say, because she had, before she met me, she worked with Annie Leibovitz, right? She worked at Rolling Stone. I mean, she was quite amazing, because she was a unbelievable darkroom person. Me, I can take a picture and I can print, but mixing chemicals, not so much, right? So when we were together, I built Donna the uber darkroom. I mean, her darkroom. Everything was at her height. The sink where the chemicals were, I had a hood over it and an exhaust taking everything out so she wouldn't tox. I had it air conditioned. I had amazing lighting, and she could turn anything on and off at her fingertips. And that's what I do. I mean, that made her so happy, right? And I figured out all the things she liked and wanted, and that's why we were together for 8 years. Because we were about to break up 18 months into it because she was always trying to pick a fight. And I said, Don, why, what was going on? This is really where I learned how to do this. I said, what is your problem? Talk to me. I'm your husband. No, I wasn't her husband yet. I'm your lover boy. We have this studio. We're comrades. I've always had your back. I got you out about 5 different jams and put you on a track so you could be you and not have to always look behind your back. So come on, what's up? And she goes, well, you'll never, you're like a computer. You don't care about me. I said, what? Everything you want, I do. Well, that's nice. I love you. I rub your feet just the way you like. Well, that's nice. I eat your pussy just like you like it. You call me your favorite lesbian. Well, that's good too. And I always bring you flowers. Yeah, I do like that. And I'm always exposing you to everything in New York, so it's yours and not mine. It's ours. She goes, well, I like that too, but I don't like going into places where oh, Don, good to see you. Where's Al? We need to separate. And I said, no, that's not it. I said, you always trying to pick a fight. And then we have sex. We don't have to have a fight to have sex. And she goes, do I do that? I said, yes. And I said, listen, I have my own foibles, but I think I got this one worked out. Tomorrow, right? So we lived in this gigantic loft, and there was this one room that was a beautiful room. I made about, out of this 18,000 square foot loft, I took this, and it was 2 buildings, and the other one was like this off the hook kind of place. The bedroom upstairs was a pyramid, right? The guy was a Mason. He had all these Masonic, stained glass windows. Anyway, so this room downstairs, that was, 20 feet by 20 feet. It was the smallest room there was. And that was like our guest room, right? But we just kind of put stuff in there. And so, so I went and got, because the Gold's Gym, where all the fighters, that place was ancient, and so I picked up all of Grandpa Stoll's clients that he couldn't do, and that I would take the newbies there, and we would, and I would teach them just like Grandpa taught me. So anyway, it was this, right? So I go to those guys, and they know me. Blah, blah, blah. And Muhammad Ali had been in that place, and all the big boxers of that time would work out there. Anyway, so I go to George, who I don't even know what position he held, but one of authority, that was for sure. And I said, George, you got any of those mats, those wrestling mats, the big foamy thing kind of stuff? Because he knew, Don would go there and shoot all those guys, right? I would take her places like that to shoot them. I had already shot him. I don't need to shoot him again. So to build her thing. So anyway, I get this mat that's like 10 foot by 10 foot. I get they have this kind of grease that they put on you. So when you're fighting and you're practicing and they hit you, you don't cut the skin. Your fist slides off, right? So I got a tub of that. So it was like Crisco, right? And I said, okay, Don, I got this worked out. And she goes, what's that? I said, when I was in high school, I wrestled, right? And I was just comic relief. But, I know the moves. So I'm going to show you the moves. And then you're going to take my clothes off, and I'm going to take your clothes off. And then you're going to grease me up, and then I'm going to grease you up. And then we're going to go Greco. And there's no biting and no punching, no gouging eyes or hitting any sensitive parts of the body. But other than that, go 100%. Because, I learned martial arts and Tai Chi, and I could do this so I wouldn't get hurt. But we would wrestle, we would start on the ground. I would always get down. She would get on top of me. And then and she loved that. And that's what we stayed married. We got married and stayed together another 7 years because of that. Because if I hadn't figured that one out and brought it to her attention, we would have left within weeks because she just was so that's I'm going to leave you with that. Whoever you're with, don't just take it for granted, you know. So I've had a lot of great women in my life, and I've never taken any of them for granted. When I was younger, I was stupid, so I kind of, but I was still way more attentive because I learned that like in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade with Kim Romano, Lisa Stiles, and Debbie Soul. I learned how to be attentive. Right? They were part of the crew. So they're the ones who taught me about sex, especially we learned about biology in sixth grade, and we learned all about sex in seventh grade, right? And we had this, almost about the Indian thing of all the tantra stuff, but our teacher brought in porno, right? Porno magazines because they were the best, to show you all the different positions, right? And what the guys seemed to like, what the girls seemed to like. So we would take that magazine and practice it because we would buy a Playboy in the candy store because the comic books and the Playboys and Penthouses and the gents were right next to the comic books. And if you were back there looking at those, the guy never said, "Hey, what are you doing?" So, and you could actually buy them. He would just put them in an unknown paper bag and put your comic book in there too. So that's how I learned about sex. Debbie Soul, and Kim Romano, and Lisa Stiles. And those names aren't theirs. Those are fictitious names to protect the innocent. And they're not too innocent. Anyway, and don't believe a word I say. But my ending statement for you guys is you need to be attentive to all that you love and care about. And all those people you love and care about, you need to be attentive to them. And then things work out, right? Because then you're building up, it's like a bank account. The deeper and truer you are to that other person, then trust you. Then when you do something stupid, instead of them getting angry or want to have an argument or want to beat you up or leave you, they go, "Oh, this guy's just so, hey, stupid," or whatever the code name for that, right? Hey, you're not being that attentive. You're being a little unconscious there. You wake up. Oh, okay. Oh, you're right. And I could say it to them, and they go, "You're right." And that's how you have a really happy, healthy relationship, right? But you have to keep doing that. And you can't, what happens is one or the other basically carries the load. Meaning, when I was in the shrinky world, and there was a period, I worked for this one shop that I did everything nobody else wanted to do. I did all the pro bono stuff, in prisons and schools and all that kind of stuff. Because all of that to me was my laboratory, right? And then I started doing marriage counseling. Nobody wanted to do that. So I did that. I could get those people out the door within 3 visits, right? And the bottom line was I would have this list of questions, right? I said, "So, you guys ever talk about sex?" And, half the people would like blush and go, "Oh, that's dirty." I said, "Do you guys have sex?" "Well, yeah. And I said, "Do you like having sex?" And I said, "Well, that's it." And then I'd say, "Do you guys masturbate?" And I said, "None of this is bad. None of this is sick. None of this is dirty. This is the human psyche, eros. Go read some of Plato. So anyway, I would always ask that. And then the other thing I would say, okay, so at home, so do both of you work? Some of the guys would say, "I work, she doesn't." I said, "So she's at home, she's cleaning the house, you take care of the books, she take care of the kids, she makes the food, she goes shopping, she buys your tobacco, your booze, your this, your that." That's a job, buddy. What do you think it would cost to pay somebody, do all this stuff, and then have sex with you, and then care for you when you're not feeling good? who's always in your corner. And unless you can do that for that person, she's not going to be around for very much longer. And the best place to start, because sometimes old habits are hard to break, but if you both clean the house together, that's the first step. Because then you notice all the work that she does. Right? So I could do that in 3 visits, and they'd either one of the two things. They'd be, by the second time so when the first thing I would talk about sex, and I'd say, well, go home, and if you got kids, put them to bed, and then talk about sex. Go buy a porno. Not a video is too. See, women don't. Men look at it. Ooh, I want to, So, but a magazine is almost like a training guide, right? Whereas a movie, it's a bit too distracting, no. So no video porn because it dehumanizes you. Whereas the Playboy or the, go find whichever magazine you both like to look at and use it as a training thing. Oh, look at what they're doing. Oh, let's try that out, right? And then talk about it. Did you like that? How did that feel? Where do you want me to touch you? This is where I want you to touch me. Tell me all the things you want, and I'll tell you all the things I want. And I would leave them in the first visit. I would leave them with that, right? And when they would come back, I said, so, did you do any of that? And the ones who said, oh, yeah. I said, okay, next thing is the cleaning the house, the do-da-dum, share everything you do together, right? Don't separate. I'm going up to work to make the money. You take care of it. No, you do it together, right? And work on it till the next week. And then you'll have a test on it, right? So we'd have a test. And either they didn't come back for the second one, or they were, third one, they were, where they just happy to talk about their sex. I'm happy to talk about cleaning the house, how they had to clean up the kids' shit, blah, 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 blah. That's when I knew, okay, you're good to go. And if you need to come back for some tune-ups, just call up the office and make an appointment. But I would say you're good. You keep doing what you just did these last 2 weeks, you're good. And it's that simple. We could have world peace if we did that, right? So nobody's there. There's 2 thumbs up. Let's have some more thumbs up. Let's have some more. It's nice to see Jamie and Fish, and I'll talk to you guys later.